network, then it reduces the capacity or the quality of your data that you receive. So the idea is to surround the volcano with these seismometers, and that would help the seismologists be able to better locate the events. Because if you can locate them and pinpoint where they are in the actual crust, if all goes well, you should be able to track how the magma is moving around in the crust. It would also give us a better idea of the magnitudes as well. So the idea of beefing up the network is to more or less get better quality data. Same situation for the GPS. You know, if you think about the technique and how it works, when you've got two instruments close to each other and you're looking at how they move relative to each other, that basically affects how deep you're looking down into the crust. So ideally, the further away they are from each other is the deeper you're looking. So before the volcano, there was not a lot of GPS instruments on island. So if we increase the number of instruments, then we can increase the vision that we're using to look down into the crust and hopefully see better and understand better what is happening down there.
Thank you. Michelle Forbes, what has been happening as far as NEMO is concerned in terms of your workload?
Okay, quite a bit has been happening behind the scenes. As we continue during this volcanic crisis, we continue to sensitize the public on various threats that the volcano can pose, giving them the current situation as we receive it from the scientists. So we let them know what is happening at the volcano in the community. So we have been going to the community, doing our drive-throughs to the community. Different communities we do at least twice a week. This week we would have done Trumaka on yesterday, and on Friday we head into Connery area. So we continue this drive-through because we know we cannot do too much face-to-face during the COVID-19 pandemic. As we know, we have some restrictions in mass gathering. So we continue to do that work and continue to reach out to the public because the public is hungry for information. They want to know what is happening at the volcano, whether there's increase in seismicity, what is the gas doing, have we had any reports from the rocks, what the analysis are. So people are anxious for information, so we have to continue to do that. We're also working with different agencies and ensuring that our readiness is there. We have already looked at our resources within our warehouse facilities and actually procuring some more items in the event that we reach to that stage where we'll need to move persons. But we have to continue that whole preparedness phase nationally with the agencies, the Red Cross, the ministries, the various departments that are responsible for different activities, such as the Ministry of Education in terms of shelter management, the Relief Supplies Committee, that's now in the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, the Ministry of Public Service. We're working with the police on a daily basis, ensuring that we have the evacuation routes nailed down. We have looked at the staging areas, visited the staging areas, which will be at Baibu and Barley in the event of any movement of population. So we continue to work with a host of agencies locally and regionally. We continue to work with CDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, in looking at our resource mobilization and any assistance that can be given, and also doing the scenario planning. What if happens, what we will need at each different stage, and also bearing in mind that we are operating in the COVID-19 environment, what are the precautions and we need to have in place. Last week, we would have met with the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. Of course, they're willing to offer any services they can to St. Vincent and Grenadines in the event of an explosive eruption. So we would have had discussions with them and the Royal St. Vincent and Grenadines Police Force as to what Trinidad can bring to the table in the event of such an emergency. So we continue our work, we continue our preparation on a daily basis. You may not see it, but these things are happening all the time.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. We also have with us District Coordinator for the North Leeward area, the disaster groups in that area. We know her as Teacher Dora. We know her as the Supervisor of Elections. Now we are also getting to know her as Dora, the community woman. What does your scope of work entail as District Coordinator for the disaster groups in the North Leeward area?
Okay, good afternoon, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Good evening. In relation to the disaster coordinator, it says coordinate, and so we coordinate. Now, for example, what do we coordinate? We coordinate people. We have community disaster response teams in the area. We have the Red Cross, and we have other organizations that are part of the Shatibler disaster team. For example, we have the police, we have the nurses, we have VINLEC, we have forestry, and since the volcano started acting up, we embrace the transportation persons, those persons with private transport and public transport. In addition to that, we have networked throughout the North Leeward district, and that has been something that we have been doing all the time. So we have decided that, listen, we are going to ensure that whatever information we have, we are going to share it. Now, during the period after we were allotted, we did a survey. We wanted to make sure that the information we had previously is updated. So we looked at our vulnerable persons, those persons who have passed to the great beyond. We took out those, anybody else who needed to be added, and that was done throughout the entire North Leeward. NEMO had information on certain communities, and they asked us to look at that, and we were able to share that and get persons to update. In addition to that, we have been communicating with people because persons need information, and I want to endorse what Bob said. COVID kind of strangled us a little bit because we had a meeting in Rosebank, and from that meeting, all the groups met. We met as a broad group, and then we met in our specific areas to nail down what is expected. When the announcement was given that we are now in the orange aspect of our plan, we needed to look at what orange means and get that organized. So that is what we did. Now, we were supposed to come back in the communities now and have small community meetings, but because of COVID, we couldn't have that. So we were kind of strangled in giving much of the information, and we really thank NEMO for coming out so that persons would have the information, because when they don't have the information, they feel lost. And sometimes you have all other misinformation coming to the fore.
Compared to 1979, of course, you would have been around 1979, the last eruption. What was your level of involvement there? Did you evacuate yourself? Did you experience shelter life or anything like that?
Yes, well, I was evacuated. I was a young teacher then and part of the family. And there are certain things that helped in 1979. We didn't have information like this. And Soufriere erupted almost immediately. So in our home and many homes, persons didn't have any plan. We didn't have any plan, but our plan went in immediately because you had your parents who were guiding you. Unfortunately for us, we heard about Soufriere and some of the activities before because my great-grandmother was alive and she used to share that kind of information with us. So when 1979 came and Soufriere impacted us, we were a little jittery, yes, but with the calming of your parents, you were able to get yourselves together. So we had chose immediately, we had the plan kicking, a plan that was not written, but there was a verbal plan. My dad worked with CDC, now VINLEC, and he said, well, listen to all the parents, listen to your mother. And they had communicated what we were supposed to do and decided where we were going to go. So we were going to go as a family to Arnosville, where our uncle lived at the time. And so we knew that if anybody were missing, we had to, they know that they were supposed to go there. For example, one of my brothers had run away, and my older brother's job was to go and find him and bring him back to the fold. My job was to organize the clothes, organize the school books, and get everybody ready to evacuate. A number of persons had left. Some persons were still lagging behind. Some persons walked into Kingston, and the roll and roll off took the others who wanted to go, and that was in the afternoon. In the afternoon, I also left on a vehicle to my uncle's house. Now, I experienced shelter life as a staffer. At first, the people in North Leeward went to Barley. And so the Barley Anglican, the government school, that was old school, and you also had the secondary school. Those were the buildings used for shelter. My job as a young teacher was partly in terms of registration, sharing information, and we would have little staff meetings in the evening, and also to assist with food. Now, when the Teachers Training Center reopened in that period, I went to Kingston. I was transferred sort of to Kingston, and I co-managed the deanery shelter, and that is that Anglican building behind the park. Most persons there were from Park Hill and South Rivers, and so I spent the rest of the time at that shelter in a management capacity.
Okay, thanks. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about how you feel about the readiness compared to 1979 then and now. Back in just a moment.
Help them read, learn, grow. Only reading is the key, so help them read, learn, grow. Let's show them how much fun it is to read, learn, grow. So parents, you play a part. First and foremost, reading from so young is advantageous. Link with the teachers, working hand in hand is a must. Just 10 minutes of your child reading to you is a plus. Get fun books, make reading priority. When children read, they are able to learn, and the more they learn, the more they grow. So parents help the kids read, learn, grow. Reading is fun, kids have to know. Read, learn, grow. The children are the future, help them read, learn, grow. So parents, you play a part.
This message is brought to you by the OECS USAID Early Learners Program, funded by United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to www.oecs.org/ELP.
Fire and dice. Together on one scratch ticket can make your dreams come true. Yes, it's Fire and Dice. The new $10 scratch game with thousands of dollars to be won. Match your numbers with any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown up to $125,000. You can double or triple your prize with Fire and Dice. Available from all lotto agents and runners. There's cash to catch with just a scratch.
Welcome back. Before we took our first break, Mrs. James was talking about what transpired in 1979 from her own personal experience. And based on her involvement now in coordinating, what would you say is the level of readiness for a possible eruption?
Well, I always
looking at it from the point of view. Yes.
I always say, no matter how much you plan, you still have to continue to plan and plan and plan. And the communication, we continue to get that message out to persons. But when we compare both periods, for example, in 1979, our eruption was almost immediate. And this time we have information now. We have some time, because in December we heard there's an eruption and it's effusive, and we look forward to see it continuing in that way rather than having an explosive eruption. In 1979, we didn't have those technical terms. All we know, Soufriere. And we didn't make that connection with what happened in 71, 72 with 79. Now we can make the connection because we have the technical support and our scientists are there now. They can make that link, and we can also make that link and know that, listen, if this continues like that, maybe if it quiets down, we could still look forward somewhere down the road, because 7 years after 1972, we had an explosive eruption. We also have better communication. In 79, it was the voices of the people on the ground coming out from Richmond. Soufriere up, and the persons who are up hard, persons who are waking from their sleep, and they went on. Now we have WhatsApp, we have all sorts of phones that we can use to give information, and more so we have a structure. NEMO is now on the ground. And because of that umbrella organization, where other organizations, like the Red Cross, so other supporting organizations and agencies are part and parcel of that process, we can communicate at a wider scale, we can share information, we can say how we feel, and NEMO is there to offer guidance and support. We didn't have that kind of structure in place at that time. So that is kudos for us. In addition to that, we have more transportation. We had a few big buses, and looking at those buses going up that hill, Peterbedel Hill, in 1979, you had people all over the bus, on top of the bus, hanging on the side of the bus and inside the bus, because if you miss the bus, you had to walk. Now we have people with private transport, more private transport, and you have more public transport that will be able to assist persons who would want to travel. I think that for me, I would raise at this time for in terms of comparison with the two periods.
Okay. Dr. Christopher, back to you. I know that people have been inquiring about the samples that have or were taken. What is the status of that? Have you gotten any results on any of those samples that were sent away for analysis?
Yeah, we actually had some data back. It's not a complete data set, because in order to get the chemistry from these rocks, there are a number of different techniques which need to be applied. One of them has been completed and it was successful. So we have some major element chemistry back from these rocks. Hopefully we can get the trace elements and the rare earth elements soon, because that will give us a different kind of information versus what the information we're getting from the data we've got back so far. But what I can tell you is that it's the composition of what we saw. It's quite homogeneous. It's quite tight. There's not much variation in it. That's one thing we observed. Another thing we observed is that it's what we call more evolved than the 1979 products. So it's basically richer in silica. It would have crystallized more than the 1979 products. What we don't know is if it's the 1979 stuff that was probably, as you might say, evolved to that composition. There are different data that we need to get to figure that out. But that is one possibility we can't rule out. We have to investigate that. And then another possibility could be that it would be just be an independent batch of magma that's evolved to that composition, which has nothing to do with the 1979 liquid, which may have left some residue in the crust. So there are a number of things that we need to figure out, and as we get more information, that will become more apparent as we have a look at the data better. So for right now, I think the best we can say is that it's slightly more evolved than the 1979 stuff. Whether it's a daughter magma, if you want to call it that, of the 1979 material, that's another story. But it's more evolved.
Okay, so it's more evolved. So somebody is asking, it's homogeneous, therefore. I think people want to know what the data means and not just what it is. And somebody else is saying, what does the info mean?
Well, as I said, there are limitations as to what we can say based on the limitations of the data. If we had more data, I could probably say slightly more. But I think one of the easiest things to take away from this is if you have a more evolved magma, it's slightly more stiffer. So that would explain why this eruption is actually building a dome. It's the lava isn't really flowing as easy as you would want it. So it affects the rheology. It affects the ease at which the lava can flow. The chemistry of it controls the physical characteristics of it. So basically, you would expect it to be slightly stiffer than the 1979 stuff. Whether or not that's significant in a volcanology aspect, we're still looking at that. I mean, one of the things I can tell you is that the samples in hand specimen, they tend to crumble, the actual rocks when you handle them, and we think that is actually a function of the rocks losing gas. So I think that's a good thing. It's actually degassing easily enough, and it's not trapping gas. So it probably might be slightly stiffer, but it's still losing gas. So there's no main issue in terms of what we're seeing so far, in terms of the chemistry of it. Once again, it's not ringing alarm bells for us. And the chemistry that we're seeing would have been similar to products erupted in the 1500s and the 1400s. So it's not unusual for this volcano to produce this composition either. It's not outlandish. Even the 1902 actually had this sort of composition, but it had a broader range.
Okay, is there a time frame for completing the final analysis of these samples?
Well, we're trying to get them done as quickly as possible. The issue is we live in a world where COVID affects almost everything that we do. And one of the techniques requires that these powders be dissolved in a very nasty acid, which is called hydrofluoric acid. And in order to use that in the UK, there are a lot of health and safety procedures that need to be followed before that can be done. And the word I got is that because of the lockdown, it's kind of difficult for them to get to do that, because you need to have quite a few first aid people on standby, and you're wearing gloves up to your elbows. I mean, it's something I've done before. So, and they're quite serious about health and safety in the UK. So there are a number of factors which are delaying us getting that data as quickly as we would want. But fingers crossed, we'll get it as quickly as possible.
Okay, somebody's asking again. What I want to know, if it's stiffer or more evolved, does it mean it is better for us in terms of explosive or not explosive?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What we think, basically what controls the explosivity of a magma is its ability to trap gas and how fast it's coming out. Now, we all have seen that we've got a really slow extrusion rate, which is good, because if you expose that gas too fast, then it will expand rapidly and generate explosions. Another thing would be, as I said, its ability to trap gas, or its readiness to trap gas, and that would be a function of its viscosity. Even though that the chemistry is different, the rough calculations we've done on the viscosity suggest that it's not significant enough for it to be more explosive than the 1979 products. So I guess all being equal, as long as it keeps coming out slowly, there should be no issue with an explosion happening.
there's a comment, not really a question. Someone is saying that what you are actually saying is that the rock shows that the gas is being released, hence it is less likely to explode.
At present, so far, it's degassing, which is a good sign. It's losing its gas. It's not trapping it. So far, it's doing that. I mean, like I said, we can only take what is given us at face value for now. So far, that's a good thing. It's releasing its gas. It's not trapping the gas. And it's coming out slowly. So that's good.
Okay. What is your schedule next for the next couple of days or weeks ahead?
We're actually prepping for a summit trip tomorrow. And the plan is to do another survey and to also get some gas measurements and to do some work on a camera that we've got looking at the dome. So it's like a threefold mission where we're trying to achieve three things tomorrow. So hopefully, if the weather is good, we'll get to achieve all three of these things tomorrow. And hopefully within the next day or two, we should be able to produce another dome volume from this survey.
Okay, how has the visibility been over the last several days?
Some days have been quite good. Other days have not been so good. I'm not the expert on the weather here, so it's kind of hard for me to tell when it's going to be a good day or not until it happens. And I think we missed a few good days earlier this week because the plan was to try and go up earlier this week, but the forecast wasn't looking promising. But hopefully we have a good day tomorrow and we can get up. We've had some really good clear days at times.
And just before we go to our second break, I know that a couple of weeks ago there were some reports that a river that's close to the volcano, I think it's in the Wallable area, was in fact or seemed to be hotter than usual. Were you able to investigate this and what were the findings, if so?
Yeah, basically what we went to visit was actually a hot spring area. The reports we got that there was a temperature increase. The area was, the waters or the ground as well was slightly hotter than the persons who frequent that area were used to. And there was also a smell of sulfur, which they claimed was never there before. So I took some water samples from the area, took some temperature measurements. We compared those temperature measurements to previous measurements from a few years ago. We found maybe around like a 5-6 degree temperature increase. I also found there was the smell of sulfur was actually hydrogen sulfide because I measured that gas with one of the instruments I have. And I also took some water samples. And basically the water samples were taken to try and confirm or disprove if there was actually a physical interaction between the magmatic system and the hot springs. Because we know that the temperature increase is a function of the eruption. But you could transfer heat through rock without actually a physical interaction between the two systems. But if you get fluids from the magmatic system, getting into the hydrothermal system, it would show up in the liquids. So the liquids are going to tell us something different to what the gases tell us and different to the temperatures. So hopefully when we get the results back from these liquids, we'll be able to tell whether or not the magmatic system is actually interacting with the hydrothermal system. And as I said a few weeks ago, we have evidence to suggest that the hydrothermal system is being heated up. It's being boiled off. So the increase in the temperature of the outflow in that area is not, or should not be of any surprise to anyone, because you're heating up the ground around the volcano. You've got a fairly larger body of hot material that was not there a few months ago. So it's going to heat up the surrounding area, heat up the groundwater, and do some funny things at the surface.
Okay, when we come back from our second break, we have some follow-up questions for you, Dr. Christopher. We'll be back in just a moment.
spread of viral infections, including the flu and COVID-19, by practicing proper hand washing. Follow these simple steps. Remove all jewelry before washing hands. Wet hands using running water. Place liquid soap in hand. Circulate using rotational movements, interlace fingers, and repeat switching hands. Wash back of fingers, rotating them in the palms. Wash fingertips, rotating them in palms. Wash thumbs using rotational movements. Thoroughly wash hands down to the wrists. Rinse hands. Dry with clean tissue. Turn off tap using tissue. Use tissue to open door and discard in bin. A simple act can make a huge difference. Stop the spread of viral infections, including the flu and COVID-19, by practicing proper hand washing. This is a message from the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment.
Diabetes is among the top 3 leading causes of death. Are you living with diabetes? If so, you may be at risk for developing complications, especially during this COVID pandemic. Let's tackle this problem by complying with taking your medication, increasing your physical activities, increasing eating a balanced and nutritious diet, checking your feet as foot care is important, and contacting your healthcare provider. Remember, diabetes can lead to blindness, amputation, and numerous harmful and life-threatening effects. Protect yourself. Know your numbers. Hearts Movement SVG reminds you to love your body and treat it right. Your health, a shared responsibility.
Welcome back. Dr. Christopher, someone has a question. How long will your team be on the ground to conduct monitoring? And another one is, are there plans to set up additional equipment, or have we completed all that is needed in that regard? The 2 questions for you.
Well, I'll answer the second question first. We have not finished putting in instrumentation. I think next week we're going to be putting in a seismometer, or probably later this week we're going to be putting in a seismometer on the Windward side, probably close to where the Windward Trail starts in that general area. With regards to other instrumentation such as degassing, we don't have a permanent degassing instrument here, and the plan is to get one on the ground as soon as possible and install it. That would be on the leeward side. It would have to be downwind of the volcano. So there are a number of other holes, if you like, that we want to plug before we can probably like relax a bit and just start monitoring. I'm not sure how long that is going to take because the degassing instrument is not on island, but hopefully it'll get here soon and I can get it installed. With regards to how long my team will be here, it varies. The organization is fairly dynamic. Some people can stay a bit longer than others, and as I would have highlighted as well, we have different specialities. So it depends on who's doing one. They might hang around a bit longer than other persons would. I mean, what I can tell you is that the rest of my team would probably be leaving around the end of the month. I can't say much about when I'm leaving. I'm still trying to get my instrumentation in. So it may take a while, a bit longer than that. So it all depends. And as I said, everyone's situation is a bit different. I guess some people have more commitments than some. So some people can stay on island for less time. It's also a function of the networks as well. If what you're doing utilizes a network, then you don't necessarily need to be here because your instruments are working and your data is coming to you. So it all depends on what's happening and who's doing what at the time.
You mentioned degassing equipment. What exactly does that do?
The plan is to get a permanent multi-gas instrument in. That is one of the instruments I have here, and it's probably the one that's being used the most. And basically what that instrument does, it measures the concentrations of carbon dioxide, water, and the two sulfur gases. You know, and as I said, those are the four most common gases in volcanic emissions. And if you can look at the ratios of these gases, you can say things about where your gas is coming from, what part of the system is contributing to it. And those are quite important questions to answer. As of present, we're not getting enough sulfur dioxide to be able to measure the mass flux of it. That is how much tons of it is coming off in a given time. We're not seeing enough of that for the technique to work. So right now, the multigas is the most useful instrument I have. And there's one ratio that we can use, which is the carbon over sulfur ratio as a forecasting technique if we don't have a sulfur flux. So the plan is to get a permanent one on the western flank of the volcano as soon as possible. Because as I said, if there's a permanent instrument there, then it reduces the exposure of us having to go up there to take a measurement, and it also increases the tempo at which we can take a measurement, because it will be controlled from the observatory from in here, so you can take a measurement remotely anytime you want. And I guess that would be a better option for everyone involved.
Forbes, I thought you indicated that you may have some more information on the question that was answered first in terms of the team on the ground or team that will in fact be coming in shortly.
Okay, yes, the team the teams will stay as long as it is necessary. And one of the things that Dr. Chris alluded to is that what we're trying to do also is to have more equipment on the flanks of the volcano that can be monitored remotely, reduce that risk of going up on the rim of the volcano. Actually, on Monday we have two new members joining the team from Montserrat. Rod Stewart, not the singer, Rod Stewart, and we have Tivon also, who will be working along with TC and the gas, if I remember correctly. And as Dr. Christopher indicated, each team come with their specialty. So the next team will have a bit of seismology and gas sampling again. If I'm correct, Christopher. So we have different teams that will be coming. So some of the team that's here now will actually leave on the 1st of March if all goes well, and then we'll have another team again rotating. So there will be overlap of teams as we go along, but it's really to ensure that we have that constant monitoring on the ground, a scientist on the ground, and we also will be having local volunteers and local staff actually joining the team. Hopefully by the end of the month, we have to have a geoscientist joining the team and other geologists on the ground joining the team. So it's really a continued effort and partnership with the Seismic Research Center, and we know that they will stay on until, as long as it is necessary for us to keep the scientists on the ground.
Okay, Doc, I think this one is for you as well. As it seemingly appears as if the dome is slowing growth, was that something that took place in the 1971 to 72 dome growing phase?
Oh, I think that's a difficult question to answer for a number of reasons. And I think Miss Dora highlighted one of them in terms of the sort of information we had or had then was not as good as we have now. And people need to understand the nature of this volcano. In order to make that sort of observations, in 1971, they probably would have had to use cameras, stills, and walk around the summit, which was probably not on. I also don't think that they had this technique of photogrammetry as well to use. So there were probably limitations as to what they could have said about 71. So I think one of the things that was highlighted a few days ago is that we're getting information now, much better information from this eruption, simply because we're in a much better position to monitor it better. It would be sort of difficult to make certain comparisons simply because the information from previous eruptions was just not there, or is a bit shady compared to what we're collecting now. So I think that's a difficult question to answer. But let me just say this: it would be highly unlikely that you could extrude a dome for 2 years, I think it was, and not have variations in your extrusion rate. It has to vary. Everything varies in nature, so nothing is constant. So if you're pushing magma to the surface, it's not going to be totally steady. It will fluctuate within reason. By how much, I can't say, but I'm fairly certain it would have varied somehow.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the human side now. Forbes, I know that sometime last week there was a bit of a flurry where people were saying that the schools were being prepared for evacuation. How much of that was what was happening then?
Okay, it was really nothing like that. We have not had any signs that the volcano is going to move into an explosive state last week or even as we speak now. We don't know what is going to happen in the next few days. The thing is that the shelters are really always should be in a state of readiness, and we just indicated to the Ministry of Education, as we did to all agencies in December, that we all need to be ready. So basically, it was really the Ministry of Education just being a little bit more proactive and encouraging their schools to really, be ready, ensure that they have the rooms ready, the furniture set aside, their posters and all of these materials that they use in their face-to-face teaching, so that they can have them for future use. So it wasn't anything to be alarmed about. Unfortunately, persons thought otherwise because the teachers were told to secure your stuff. And this is ongoing. Today we had meeting with the Ministry of Education, because we have ongoing sessions with the shelter managers. We have new shelters that have been added just for volcanic and emergency only, and so we have to do different sessions. So it's a constant communication with the Ministry of Education. We have training. I would have sat in on a session with them with the meeting of the principals and all the shelter managers to ask some questions. They would have had some questions that they had to ask and really guide them through the process of what is going to happen, what is expected of them in terms of managing an emergency shelter in these times. And of course, they taking into consideration the COVID-19 environment to safeguard their own health. So it was nothing, we didn't give any other instruction. The ministry being proactive, they have a department that deals with school safety in particular, and looking at rounding up and ensuring that the facilities are ready. And that department has really been working closely with us to ensure that the ministry and the facilities are at a state of readiness. So, there was no need to be alarmed. And as I said before, a lot of things are happening on the behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. The constant discussion with the different communities, with different organizations on, what we are doing, how we are managing this particular emergency, and what we can expect. So, you'll have these a bit of anxiety from time to time, as if you say the rush can continue, people will be anxious, and we have to remember that we really need to listen to the authorities on this particular crisis. NEMO and the Seismic Research Center, because we have a scientist on ground all the time who will be there to answer the questions. So, there's no need to be too anxious, but we know people are a bit anxious, and, they can be a little bit jittery and want more information. And of course, we have those who will deliberately also spread the rumor. So we really just have to continue to monitor and continue to listen to the information that we are actually putting out.
Thank you. We'll take our third break and come back for a final segment, and we have quite a few questions when we do that.
As we applaud the efforts of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment in managing the spread of COVID-19, we wish to remind you to follow all the protocols. Most importantly, practice proper hand washing, cover your cough and sneeze in the crook of your elbow, do not touch your face, wear a mask when in public or where it is not possible to practice social distancing. Call the COVID-19 hotline at 534-4325 if you are experiencing flu-like symptoms. Together, we can stop the spread of COVID-19. A message by the National Reconciliation Advisory Committee.
Welcome back. So, as I said before we took that last break, we have some questions for you. What does the lack in the presence of sulfur dioxide mean? And I presume that's for our scientists. Also, will the fact that we are still adding equipment affect evacuation warning time? I'll give you time to answer those and get back to the others.
Yeah, as I said, we've started to see sulfur dioxide, and as I explained before, as long as you're erupting, you should have seen it. And what we think was happening that because you have so much water, I mean, you have a lake in the crater of this volcano, so you can imagine how much water is actually beneath the surface of the actual crater, because the lake is just the top of that water table. So the water is actually mixing with the gas. The gas is mixing with the water. So we weren't seeing it at the top. Now, the fact that we're seeing it at the top means one of two things. It either means that we're producing more gas, which I don't think we are, because the extrusion rate has not changed. It's still slow. Actually, it's slowed a bit. So we should not be seeing, or we should not be producing more gas. Well, this volcano should not be producing more gas. The second option would be that there's less water to hide the gas that's coming out now, because you're heating the water up and you're moving some of it off, you're boiling off some of it. So think of the water as a curtain that was hiding the sun. If you shorten your curtain, then some of the sunlight comes through. If you totally remove that curtain, then you see all of the sunlight. So basically, we've got less water to hide how much sulfur it was hiding before. So some of it is coming through. As I said, when I go to the summit tomorrow, I'll have a look at how much sulfur we're seeing. And if I see it increasing, which I should be able to see, if it does increase, then that would convince me even further that the water is being removed. So that is I think the gist of what I was trying to say. The water was basically masking the sulfur dioxide, but it should have been there, and I'm pretty certain that it was there. And we can probably find it in those water samples that I collected, as I mentioned earlier. With regards to reaction time for for what the volcano is going to do. They're basically two things which control how much time we have. And one of them is purely the volcano. We are quite certain as to what is it we are uncomfortable with seeing from these instruments. How long between us seeing them and the volcano exploding is up to the volcano. I've seen eruptions where you've had 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days of a buildup. I've seen explosions where there was not much of a buildup. You had less time to react. So basically, the volcano would dictate how long of a warning it gives us. I think the other thing that determines whether or not, or how long of a time you have, is if we can see the signals for what they are. And I'm fairly certain we can see them for what they are if we see them. We are watching the volcano 24 hours a day. Not just people here, there are people in Montserrat, the people in Trinidad watching that volcano 24 hours a day, looking at the drums. So there's quite a few eyes looking at what this volcano is doing. It's not just me here and a handful of people who are here. So hopefully, if there's a problem, we get enough of a warning. Because as I said, I'm fairly certain we will see it for what it is. The whole idea about putting in more instruments, as I said, better data quality. You can probably detect smaller earthquakes if you've got more seismometers in. I mean, there's a lot of good things that can happen with more instruments in a better network. You can be more confident that you're seeing what you're seeing in your data. So it's only going to help us see better or understand better what the volcano is doing, having the instrumentation being increased.
Okay, another one for you, I think, Doc. I read that the magma oozing per second is as big as a dump truck. Which local playing field can the new dome be compared with?
Yeah, as I was saying a few days ago, the last dimensions we had, the length of it is probably around 600 meters. Now, I think most people would be familiar with what 100 meters is, because that is what the short race they run in the Olympics. That is what these fast guys run. So it's roughly 6 times that distance. Probably 6 times the length of a football field, because I think a big football field might be around 90 meters, the actual pitch that you play on, a large one. So probably around 7 times the length of one of these football pitches is probably the long dimension of the dome. The width of it is probably just around 200 meters, which is twice the length of a 100-meter track. And then the height of it is 90 meters, which is roughly 100-meter track. So I think that's a good scale to use, a 100-meter track. I think most people would have run 100-meter races in school. So that's a good scale to use, the 100-meter track, and not so much a dump truck. The dump truck is more about the volume of material it's producing every second. So basically the idea is if you were to fill the back of that truck with that material every second, then you would replicate what the dome is doing. But in terms of the actual dimensions of it, think in terms of football fields or 100-meter tracks. So it's around 6 or 7 football fields length, 2 across and 1 high.
Okay. This one I suspect is for Nemo. How informed are the residents of North Windward and North Leeward on evacuation plans if evacuation becomes necessary?
Okay, I think they're pretty much informed. This is not something that we started in terms of just December. We have been working with these communities for quite some time, for quite a few years actually. So we continue to inform the population, because we know some persons may not have paid attention over the years. We have had ongoing work with the Seismic Research Center, different universities for over 10 years, and we have really been informing persons of the risk that we are living with, and in terms of the evacuation plan now. So it's ongoing, but we think that the communities are pretty much informed. We would have had some sessions since the effusive eruptions began, and it's ongoing. It's always a work in progress, and it's really up to the individuals also in the community to really look for the information, ask for the information, get the information, because it is available, and we are coming through the communities from time to time. We have community leaders within the communities that you can actually ask for that information. As we have teacher Dora here today, she's one of the leaders in the Chateaubriand area who have been working with us over a number of years. So we have had different avenues, different ways of informing the community. And as long as the effusive eruption continue, we are also looking to probably do a mock exercise later on over the next few months, so we can actually get the communities more involved, depending on the COVID-19 situation in country.
And of course, to add that we're supposed to have another community engagement sometime next week, similar to the one we had for Georgetown a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
As we prepare to wrap up, Doc, there are some more questions for you. Could it be that the dome growth appears to have slowed because the magma has a larger square area to distribute the material? And as a follow-up to that, someone wants to know if you anticipate that the new dome will end up being larger than the old one.
Yeah, I think the first question is quite interesting because basically I think what they're asking if it's harder to see smaller changes because it's a larger dome. And that is probably true. But I think based on the technique which we use to measure the dome volume, because in case people don't understand how we measure the volume, basically we fly this drone over the top of the dome at a fixed height. And we take overlapping photos of the entire dome from one end to the next, trying to get all of the dome in. And then we stitch these photos together to create a three-dimensional image of the dome. So hopefully you have errors which are consistent and they don't vary much simply because the dome is larger. So we know that there are errors in our measurements. And I think what would affect the quality of those measurements is the quality of the images and not so much the size of the dome. So if we do a bad survey for whatever reason, then we will be less confident in the values that we get. So I don't think the size of the dome is going to make a big difference because you're looking at a very small area in each photo and you're stitching them together. And you have to remember that it's software that does that and not the human eye. So computers are quite complex and they're quite good at pulling this sort of information out. So I don't think the size of the dome it was going to be an issue. I can't remember the second question that was asked.
The second one was whether or not this dome is, if you can predict if it's going to be bigger than the last one.
Well, yeah, that's a hard question to answer. We can't constrain volumes at the moment. We don't know how much magma is there, and we don't know how much energy the system has. It doesn't seem so far like the eruption is fairly energetic. And as I would have discussed in a previous interview, the issue is not so much how much material is there because you can't really finish that. The issue is how much energy the system has to put the material onto the surface. So if the material is eruptible, can the system erupt it? But you're not going to exhaust how much material is there because there's quite a bit of magma down in the crust and the mid crust and the low crust, or even the upper crust as well. So you can't empty that magma reservoir if that's what the question is. So it's difficult to say how long it will go on for and how big the dome will get. I can't answer that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a perfect note on which to end. I'd like to thank our panelists this evening, our scientist, Dr. Thomas Christopher. We also had NEMO Director, Ms. Michelle Forbes, and District Coordinator for North Leeward Disaster Group in the person of Mrs. Dora James. Thank you all for your contribution and for taking the time, and thank you for viewing. see you again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Roundtable Talk. Good evening.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our staff meeting. We'll now have the minutes of the last meeting.
Miss Peters, you don't know it's bad manners to cough and don't cover your mouth?
Well, listen, I have a common cold, and at some point, it is expected that I'm either going to cough or sneeze. So you all don't have to be that dramatic.
But we don't know if it's cold or COVID. Some people like be wrong and strong. Imagine you cough and don't cover your mouth, and because people talk is a problem.
Well, no wonder COVID spreading like wildfire across the world.
None of you can give me all the virus in here, you know.
Is either practice good hygiene or I stay at home. I ain't able.
Well, seeing that you know so much about proper hygiene, enlighten me now.
What you mean? It's common knowledge. If you have to cough or sneeze, you cover your mouth with a tissue or the cuff of your elbow so that the virus won't spread in the atmosphere. That's it. It's not rocket science.
Okay, miss, know it all. Now I know better, I will do better.
Remember, it's not about who knows it all. Our health is a shared responsibility. For our next staff development session, I'm going to ask a medical doctor to discuss respiratory hygiene with us. So let's get back to our meeting.
Read, learn, grow. The children are the future. Help them read, learn, grow. Only reading is the key, so help them read, learn, grow. Let's show them how much fun it is to read, learn, grow. So parents, you play a part. First and foremost, reading from so young is advantageous. Link with the teachers. Working hand in hand is a must. Just 10 minutes of your child reading to you is a plus. Get fun books, make reading priority. When children read, they are able to learn. And the more they learn, the more they grow. So parents help the kids read, learn, grow. Reading is fun, kids have to know. Read, learn, grow. The children are the future. Help them read, learn, grow. So parents, you play a part.
This message is brought to you by the OECS USAID Early Learners Program, funded by United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to www.oecs.org/ELP.
Stop the spread of viral infections, including the flu and COVID-19, by practicing proper hand washing. Follow these simple steps. Remove all jewelry before washing hands. Wet hands using running water. Place liquid soap in hand. Circulate using rotational movements, interlace fingers, and repeat switching hands. Wash back of fingers, rotating them in the palms. Wash fingertips, rotating them in palms. Wash thumbs using rotational movements. Thoroughly wash hands down to the wrists. Rinse hands. Dry with clean tissue. Turn off tap using tissue. Use tissue to open door and discard in bin. A simple act can make a huge difference. Stop the spread of viral infections, including the flu and COVID-19, by practicing proper hand washing. This is a message from the Ministry of Health,